I embraced her feminist ideology to cure my toxic masculinity, and my transformation proved she wanted control, not growth, so I filed for divorce. I thought it was just a phase. Man, was I wrong. It began subtly with little comments here and there about how I handled situations. But over the past few months, it escalated into a full-blown assault on everything that made me who I am. She'd gotten deep into feminist theory, spending hours on social media consuming content about dismantling the patriarchy and toxic masculine behaviors. Every evening became a lecture about how I needed to evolve and do better. According to her, the way I carried myself, made decisions, and even the tone of my voice were all symptoms of some ancient masculine disease that needed curing. "Look at these young men," she'd say, showing me videos of General Z guys crying on camera about their feelings or apologizing for their gender. "They're so much more evolved than your generation. They understand that masculinity is just a social construct that hurts everyone." I'd watch these videos of grown men acting like emotional children, and frankly, it disgusted me. But every time I expressed any disagreement, she'd pounce on it like a cat on a mouse. See, there it is again. You can't even handle a different perspective without getting defensive. That's textbook toxic masculinity right there. It was a perfect trap. Disagree with her feminist ideology and you're proving her point. Stay silent, and she'd push harder, interpreting my silence as sulking or passive aggression. There was no winning with this woman anymore. The breaking point came last Tuesday when she brought up my role as the provider in our household. For 8 years, I'd worked my ass off to make sure we had everything we needed. I took pride in being able to support my family, in being the rock she could depend on. But apparently that was problematic too. "Your need to be the provider is just another way you assert dominance," she said, not even looking up from her phone. "It's controlling. Modern relationships are about equality, not these outdated gender roles." I set down my coffee harder than necessary. Outdated gender roles? I work 60 hours a week so you can pursue your hobbies and spend time with your friends. How is that controlling? There you go again, raising your voice and getting aggressive. You're proving my point. I wasn't raising my voice. I was speaking with conviction, something she'd apparently decided was inherently toxic. Every firm statement, every moment of leadership, every time I didn't bend to her, became evidence of my supposed toxicity. "You know what your problem is?" she continued, finally looking at me with that condescending expression I'd grown to hate. "You're stuck in this primitive mindset where you think being a man means being dominant and aggressive. The future belongs to men who can embrace their feminine side, who aren't afraid to be vulnerable and emotional." I stared at her, wondering when exactly I'd married a stranger. This wasn't the woman I'd fallen in love with. That woman had actually appreciated my strength, my decisiveness, my ability to handle whatever life threw at us. She used to feel safe with me, protected. Now she acted like I was some kind of monster for possessing the very qualities that had attracted her in the first place. "You should be celebrating this evolution," she went on, her voice getting more animated. "Gen Z is showing us what healthy masculinity looks like. They're not afraid to cry, to show emotion, to let women lead. They're breaking down these toxic barriers that have held us back for centuries." I watched her get excited about the idea of weak, emotional men, and something cold settled in my chest. She was so caught up in her ideology that she couldn't see the contradiction in her own desires. She wanted me to be weak, but I'd bet money that if I actually became the kind of man she claimed to want, she'd lose all respect for me. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly, the beginning of a plan forming in my mind. Her eyes lit up with surprise and hope. "Really? You're actually listening to me?" "I'm always listening to you. Maybe it's time I really consider what you're saying about evolution and modern masculinity." She practically bounced in her seat. "Oh my God. Yes. This is exactly what I've been hoping for. You have no idea how attractive it is when a man can admit he needs to grow." Attractive. That was rich. She was attracted to the idea of breaking me down, of molding me into something completely different. But I had news for her. She was about to get exactly what she asked for, and I had a feeling she wasn't going to like it nearly as much as she thought. "You know what? You're absolutely right about everything. I need to evolve past this outdated masculinity and embrace what the new generation represents." The smile that spread across her face was almost predatory. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally gotten through to me and could begin the process of turning me into one of those emotional, submissive men she'd been praising. Little did she know I was about to give her a masterclass in exactly what she was asking for: And by the time I was done, she'd be begging for the toxic man she was so desperate to change. The next morning, she was already planning my transformation like some kind of life coach on steroids. She'd apparently been waiting for this moment for months because she had a whole roadmap ready for my evolution. First, we need to address your communication style, she announced over breakfast, pulling out her phone to show me articles she'd saved. You need to learn to express your emotions more openly. Men who suppress their feelings are contributing to toxic masculinity. She showed me videos of men in therapy circles crying about their childhood trauma and apologizing for their masculine instincts. These grown men looked broken, defeated, like they'd been convinced that everything natural about being male was somehow wrong. Isn't it beautiful? She gushed. They're finally free from the prison of traditional masculinity. Prison. She called masculinity a prison. I nodded along, playing my part perfectly. You're absolutely right. I can see how suppressing emotions has been holding me back. Her excitement was palpable. She started sending me links throughout the day, podcasts about healthy masculinity, articles about men who'd found happiness by embracing their feminine side, videos of couples where the man had become more emotionally available. That evening, she introduced phase 2 of her plan. I think we should start attending some workshops together. There's this amazing group that helps couples navigate toxic masculine patterns. The facilitator is incredible. She's helped so many men break free from these harmful behaviors. I raised an eyebrow. She? Yes, Dr. Martinez. She specializes in helping men overcome their socialized masculine traits. She has such insight into how patriarchal conditioning affects relationships. So my wife wanted me to pay a female therapist to tell me everything wrong with being a man. The irony was almost funny, but played along. That sounds perfect. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to become the man you need me to be. The workshop was exactly what I expected. A room full of beaten-down men sitting in a circle while a woman lectured them about their inherent toxicity. The other guys looked miserable, constantly apologizing for their thoughts and behaviors, walking on eggshells around their partners. My wife sat next to me, practically glowing with satisfaction, as Dr. Martinez explained how traditional masculine roles were fundamentally harmful to relationships. The provider mentality, Dr. Martinez said, looking directly at me, is often rooted in control and dominance rather than genuine care. Men who insist on being the primary breadwinner are usually compensating for feelings of inadequacy. My wife squeezed my hand encouragingly, expecting me to absorb this wisdom gratefully. Instead, I was calculating exactly how I was going to turn this whole ideology against her. After the session, she couldn't contain her enthusiasm. How do you feel? Wasn't that enlightening? I could see you really listening and processing everything. It was eye-opening, I said truthfully. It had opened my eyes to just how far she was willing to go to destroy everything I was. I'm starting to understand how my masculine conditioning has been affecting our relationship. Oh my God, yes, finally. Do you see how your need to always be in charge and make decisions has been stifling my voice? Absolutely. From now on, I want you to feel completely empowered to lead in our relationship. I've been too dominant for too long. She actually clapped her hands together like a child getting a present. This woman was celebrating the prospect of emasculating her own husband, but she had no idea what she was actually asking for. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out her phone again. I found this amazing podcast series called Unto New Man. It's all about men who've successfully transitioned away from toxic masculinity. I think it would be so beneficial for you to listen to it. I took her phone and looked at the podcast description. Episode titles like Embracing Your Inner Feminine, Why Crying is Masculine, and Learning to Follow Your Partner's Lead. It was like a blueprint for turning men into emotional doormats. This looks perfect, I said, handing back her phone. I'll start listening tonight. Her smile was radiant. I'm so proud of you for being open to this growth. Most men are too fragile in their masculinity to even consider changing. Fragile masculinity, another one of her favorite phrases. According to her logic, being confident in your masculinity was fragile but constantly questioning, and apologizing for it was strength. The mental gymnastics were impressive. You know what? I said, putting my arm around her. I think you're right about everything. I've been too stuck in old patterns, too afraid to evolve. But I'm ready now. I'm ready to become the kind of man this generation needs. Really? You mean it completely? In fact, I want to go all in on this transformation. No half measures. If I'm going to evolve, I want to do it properly. She practically squealed with delight. This is the best thing that's ever happened to us. I can't wait to see who you become." Neither could I, because the man I was about to become was going to teach her exactly why she'd fallen in love with the toxic version in the first place. She wanted evolution. She was about to get it in ways she never imagined. The game was about to begin, and she had just handed me all the rules. The transformation began immediately. I downloaded an app that could send automated text messages at scheduled intervals and programmed it with the most emotionally needy stream of consciousness messages I could think of. Things like, "Just thinking about how grateful I am for your patience with my growth journey and feeling so vulnerable right now. Can we talk about my feelings when you get home?" I set them to go off every few minutes throughout her workday. By noon on the first day, my phone was buzzing with her responses. "Honey, this is sweet, but I'm in a meeting." 20 minutes later, "I love that you're being more open, but maybe we can talk tonight." An hour after that, "Can you maybe space these out a bit? I'm trying to focus." But the messages kept coming, just like those emotionally evolved General Z men she admired so much. I was giving her exactly what she asked for. A man who wasn't afraid to express his feelings constantly and needed reassurance every few hours. The bathroom transformation was even better. I started using her expensive skincare routine every morning, leaving the products scattered across the counter, her $100 face cream, her special serums, her organic hair masks. I used them all with the enthusiasm of someone embracing their feminine side. "Babe, did you use my retinol serum?" she asked the second morning, staring at the chaos I'd left behind. "Oh yes. You were right about men needing to take better care of themselves. I'm really getting in touch with my feminine energy through self-care." She forced a smile, but I could see the irritation in her eyes as she surveyed the mess. Her precious bathroom sanctuary looked like a hurricane had hit it, but she couldn't complain without contradicting everything she'd been preaching about men embracing their feminine side. "That's great. Maybe just try to be a little more organized." "Organization is just another form of control," I said, quoting one of her favorite podcasts back at her. "I'm learning to be more free-flowing and intuitive like you taught me." She opened her mouth to argue, then caught herself. How could she criticize me for following her own advice? The real genius move was implementing emotional check-ins. Every evening I'd initiate long circular conversations about my feelings, my childhood trauma, my fears about our relationship. I'd ask her to validate my emotions and help me process my thoughts for hours at a time. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Martinez said about masculine conditioning," I'd begin, settling in for what I knew would be a marathon session. "I realized that my father never taught me how to be vulnerable, and I'm worried that's affecting our connection." At first, she was thrilled. This was exactly what she'd wanted, a man who wasn't afraid to dive deep into emotional territory. But after 3 hours of circular conversations about feelings with no resolution or purpose, I could see her energy draining. "Maybe we could watch a movie," she'd suggest weakly. "Movies are just escapism," I'd respond, using her own words against her. "I think it's more important that we stay present with these emotions." "Don't you want me to continue growing?" The beauty of it was that every complaint she had played right into my hands. If she got frustrated with my constant need for emotional processing, she was being unsupportive of my growth. If she got annoyed with my texts, she was discouraging my emotional expression. If she minded me using her products, she was reinforcing toxic gender stereotypes. I'd created the perfect trap using her own ideology. The decision-making paralysis was the next phase. Whenever she asked me about anything, what to have for dinner, which movie to watch, what to do on the weekend, I'd respond with, "I don't want to impose my masculine need for control. What do you think we should do?" But then I'd follow up with endless questions about her choices. "Are you sure that's what you really want? I want to make sure I'm not influencing your decision with my masculine energy. How does that choice make you feel? Are you choosing it because it's what you actually want, or because you think it's what I want?" Every decision became an exhausting philosophical discussion about power dynamics and gender roles. She couldn't make a simple choice without me turning it into a therapy session about emotional autonomy. "Can't you just pick a restaurant?" she snapped after 20 minutes of my interrogating her dinner preferences. "I'm just trying to be more conscious of how my masculinity might be affecting your choices," I said innocently. "Isn't this what you wanted? A man who thinks about these things." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time, and not in a good way. The enthusiasm she'd had for my transformation was already starting to crack, and we were only a week in. The automated messages kept buzzing her phone throughout our conversation. Another gem from my app, I'm feeling really insecure about whether I'm evolving fast enough for you. Can you send me some affirmation? She looked at her phone, then back at me, and I could see something shifting behind her eyes. For the first time since this whole feminist crusade began, she looked genuinely annoyed with the evolved behavior she'd been demanding. Maybe you could turn the messages down just a little, she asked carefully. But I thought you wanted me to be more emotionally expressive. Are you saying I'm being too open with my feelings? She was trapped, and she knew it. Every complaint about my new behavior was a criticism of everything she'd been advocating for. She was getting exactly what she'd asked for, and she was already starting to hate it. This was just the beginning. By week 2, I'd escalated to the financial independence phase of my evolution. She'd always criticized my role as the primary provider, calling it a form of control. So, I decided to liberate her from that oppression entirely. I've been thinking about what you said about the provider mentality being toxic, I announced over breakfast. I realized that by handling all the finances, I've been robbing you of your agency and independence. She looked up from her phone where she'd been deleting another wave of my automated emotional check-in messages. What do you mean? Well, splitting everything 50-50 would be more egalitarian, right? You've always said equality is important, so from now on, we'll each pay our own way. That way, neither of us is in a position of power over the other. Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. But I only work part-time. My income isn't... Oh, I know it might be challenging at first, but I have complete faith in your ability to step up. You're always saying women are just as capable as men. This is your chance to prove it. The math was simple and brutal. My income covered about 80% of our expenses. Her part-time job at the local art gallery barely covered her personal spending money. If she had to pay half of everything, mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, she'd need to find a full-time job immediately and drastically change her lifestyle. Maybe we should discuss this more, she said carefully. Discussion implies negotiation, and negotiation implies power dynamics, I replied, throwing her favorite therapy speak back at her. I'm just trying to create a more equitable partnership. Isn't that what you wanted? She spent the entire day, frantically calling about full-time positions. Her carefree artist lifestyle suddenly threatened by the equality she'd been demanding. But this was just the warm-up act. The real masterpiece came that evening, when we went to dinner with her parents. Her father had never liked me much, thought I was too assertive, too traditional. Her mother had always been polite but distant. Perfect testing ground for my new evolved persona. So, how's work going? Her father asked, the usual small talk that kicked off these dinners. Actually, I've been doing a lot of personal growth lately, I replied, my voice taking on that soft, uncertain tone I'd perfected. I'm learning to be more in touch with my emotions, and less driven by masculine expectations. Her mother raised an eyebrow. My wife beamed with pride, still thinking this was going according to her plan. Halfway through dinner, the waiter brought the wrong order to our table. Normally, I would have politely but firmly corrected the mistake. Instead, I just sat there staring at the plate with a confused expression. Honey, my wife whispered, that's not what you ordered. Oh, I know, I said, poking at the food uncertainly. But I don't want to be confrontational. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to have tonight. The universe works in mysterious ways, right? She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Her father looked disgusted. The waiter walked away, and I continued eating food I hadn't ordered, talking about how important it was to go with the flow instead of imposing my will on situations. When the bill came, I did something that would have been unthinkable in my previous life. I let her father pay without even reaching for my wallet. Thank you so much, I said earnestly. I'm learning to receive generosity without letting my masculine pride get in the way. Her father's jaw tightened. He'd just watched his daughter's husband turn into exactly the kind of weak, passive man he despised. But my wife couldn't say anything without contradicting her own ideology. The drive home was silent, except for the automated messages still pinging her phone every few minutes, feeling really connected to my feminine energy tonight. Thank you for supporting my journey. Can you please turn those off? She finally snapped. I thought you wanted me to be more emotionally expressive. Not every 5 minutes. It's too much. So, you want me to suppress my emotions again? Go back to being emotionally unavailable? She was trapped in her own logic and she knew it. Every complaint about my behavior was an admission that she preferred the toxic version of me. But I wasn't done yet. The next test came 3 days later when we encountered a situation that would have normally triggered my protective instincts. We were at the grocery store when some guy started hitting on her aggressively. In the old days, one look from me would have sent him packing. But the new, evolved me just stood there watching uncomfortably as this creep invaded her personal space. "Come on, beautiful, just give me your number," he persisted, stepping closer when she tried to back away. She looked at me desperately, expecting me to step in like I always had. Instead, I fidgeted with my phone, avoiding eye contact. "I don't really feel comfortable with confrontation," I said weakly, when she finally managed to get away from the guy herself. "Dr. Martinez says masculine aggression is often just toxic compensation for insecurity." The look she gave me could have melted steel. For the first time in months, I saw genuine anger directed at my behavior instead of my supposed toxicity. "Are you kidding me right now?" she hissed once we were in the car. "I'm just trying to be the evolved man you wanted, non-violent, non-confrontational, in touch with my emotions, instead of reacting with primitive masculine instincts." That wasn't primitive. That was... She couldn't finish the sentence because finishing it would mean admitting that she actually wanted me to be protective, aggressive when necessary, traditionally masculine in the ways that mattered. She'd spent months tearing down those exact qualities, and now she was furious that they were gone. That night, she barely spoke to me, but I could see her watching me differently, like she was finally starting to understand what she'd actually been asking for. The automated messages kept coming, each one a reminder of the emotional, sensitive man she demanded I become. "I love how we're both growing together. I feel so safe being vulnerable with you." She turned off her phone and went to bed early, but I knew sleep wouldn't come easily. She was starting to realize that she'd been fighting a war against her own desires, and she was losing. By week 3, the cracks in her feminist facade were becoming impossible to ignore. She'd grown quiet, irritable, and started spending more time away from home. But I wasn't about to let up now. This lesson needed to be thorough. The breaking point came when her best friend invited us to a dinner party. This was perfect, a social setting where my new personality could really shine in front of people who knew the old me. I spent an hour getting ready, using every product in her skincare arsenal, and asking her opinion on everything. "Do you think this moisturizer makes my skin look too glowy? I want to embrace my feminine side, but I don't want to overdo it." She watched me fuss over my appearance with barely concealed disgust. The woman who'd spent months telling me that men needed to be more in touch with their feminine energy was now repulsed by seeing me actually do it. At the party, I was the perfect example of evolved masculinity. When the men gathered to talk sports, I declined to join them. "I'm trying to move away from those competitive masculine spaces," I explained to the host. "I'd rather discuss emotional wellness or maybe share some poetry I've been writing about my feelings." I could see my wife cringing from across the room, but she couldn't say anything without exposing her hypocrisy. When someone brought up politics, I immediately deferred to my wife. I don't really have strong opinions anymore. I've learned that my masculine perspective tends to dominate conversations, so I prefer to listen and learn from others, especially women. The other men looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Their wives seemed equally confused. Nobody knew how to respond to a man who'd completely abdicated any semblance of leadership or conviction. But the real masterpiece came when someone spilled red wine on my wife's white dress. In the past, I would have immediately taken charge, gotten napkins, helped clean it up maybe, even offered to take her home to change. Instead, I just stood there looking helpless. "Oh no," I said, wringing my hands. "This is so overwhelming. I don't know what to do. Should we call someone? Maybe we should leave. I'm feeling really anxious about this situation." She stared at me in complete shock as the other guests jumped in to help. Her husband, the man who used to handle every crisis with calm competence, was having an emotional breakdown over spilled wine. "Maybe you could help clean this up," she suggested through gritted teeth. "I don't want to assume that's my role," I replied. "That would be imposing traditional gender expectations. You're perfectly capable of handling this yourself." The car ride home was explosive. "What the hell was that?" she finally screamed, her composure completely shattered. "I was being the evolved man you wanted, non-dominant, emotionally available, aware of my masculine privilege. That wasn't evolved. That was pathetic." The word hung in the air between us, like a bomb. She'd finally said what she really thought about the kind of man she'd been demanding I become. "So, you think emotional availability is pathetic?" "No, I think... She struggled to find words that wouldn't completely contradict everything she'd been preaching. I think you're taking this too far. How can someone take evolution too far? Either you want me to grow past toxic masculinity or you don't. She was silent for the rest of the drive, but I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. She was finally connecting the dots between what she'd been asking for and what she actually wanted. The next few days were torture for her. I continued my performance with religious dedication, more automated messages, more emotional processing sessions, more indecision and passivity. I asked her permission for everything, deferred to her judgment constantly, and turned every conversation into a therapy session about feelings. I've been thinking about our dynamic, I said one evening, settling in for another marathon emotional discussion. Do you think my evolution is threatening to your sense of security? Sometimes women subconsciously prefer traditional masculine energy even when they intellectually reject it. She looked at me with something approaching hatred. Can we please just watch TV without analyzing our relationship? Media consumption is often just avoidance of deeper emotional work, I replied, quoting her favorite podcast. I think it would be more growth-oriented if we explored why you're resisting this conversation. That's when she broke. I can't do this anymore, she screamed, jumping up from the couch. I can't stand who you've become. You're weak. You're needy. You're not a man anymore. There it was. The truth she'd been fighting for weeks. But this is what you wanted, I said calmly. A man who's evolved past toxic masculinity. A man who's in touch with his emotions and not dominated by masculine aggression. No, it's not. This isn't what I wanted at all. Then what did you want? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, realizing the trap she'd walked into. What she wanted was for me to be strong but defer to her opinions. Protective but not dominant. Confident but not assertive. She wanted all the benefits of traditional masculinity with none of the aspects that challenged her worldview. I want you to go back to how you were before, she admitted quietly. You want me to go back to being toxic? You weren't toxic. You were a man, a real man, and I miss him. The admission hung between us like a confession. She'd spent months attacking the very qualities she now admitted she missed. She tried to destroy the man she'd fallen in love with, only to discover that the replacement was everything she actually despised. So all that talk about evolution and toxic masculinity, I don't know, she said, tears starting to flow. I got caught up in all these ideas and I thought I wanted something different, but this isn't it. This isn't you, and I hate it. I watched her cry, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that my point had been proven so thoroughly, sadness that it had come to this, that she'd been so willing to tear down everything good about our relationship in service of an ideology that she didn't even really believe. I want my husband back, she whispered. I want the man who takes charge, who protects me, who doesn't need my permission to exist. I want you to be strong again. She thought this was the moment I'd drop the act, and everything would go back to normal. She thought we'd learned our lesson and could move forward. She had no idea what was coming next. I looked at her tear-streaked face. This woman who'd spent months systematically attacking everything masculine about me, now begging for me to return to being the man she'd called toxic. The irony was almost too perfect. So, let me get this straight, I said, my voice calm and measured. You want me to go back to being the toxic, masculine, dominant man you've been trying to cure for the past 3 months? Yes, she whispered. Please, I can't take this anymore. I need you to be yourself again. The myself who was supposedly holding you back. The myself who was too controlling, too aggressive, too traditional. She nodded desperately, not even caring about the contradiction anymore. The problem is, I continued, standing up and walking to our bedroom, I've learned something important during this whole experience. I returned with a manila envelope that made her face go pale. I've learned that you don't actually respect the man you married. You spent months trying to break down everything that made me who I am. You attacked my character, my masculinity, my very essence as a human being. But I was wrong. I see that now. You were wrong about what you wanted, but you weren't wrong about your fundamental lack of respect for me. You prove that you're willing to tear down your own husband to feel intellectually superior. I set the envelope on the coffee table between us. A woman who truly loved and respected her husband wouldn't spend months trying to destroy his core identity. She wouldn't celebrate the idea of breaking him down and rebuilding him according to her political ideology. Her eyes were fixed on the envelope, understanding dawning across her features. What you wanted wasn't evolution or growth. You wanted control. You wanted to remake me into something more convenient for your worldview, and you disguised it as concern for my personal development. That's not true, she said weakly, but we both knew it was. The saddest part is that you destroyed something beautiful. We had a partnership where I was strong and you were secure, where I provided and you flourished, where I protected and you felt safe. But that wasn't enough for you. I pushed the envelope closer to her. You had to turn it into a political statement. You had to make our love about your ideology instead of just appreciating what we had. She picked up the envelope with shaking hands. These are divorce papers, I said simply. Because here's what I realized during my evolution. I don't want to be married to someone who fundamentally despises who I am. But I don't. I love you. I want things to go back to how they were. No, you love the idea of having a strong man when it's convenient for you. But you can't resist the urge to tear him down when your friends and social media tell you that strength is toxic. I sat back down, completely calm now that the truth was finally out. I gave you exactly what you asked for, and you hated every second of it. That should tell you something about the ideology you've been following. We can work through this, she pleaded. I'll change. I'll never bring up that stuff again. You'll change until the next wave of feminist theory comes along. Until your friends start talking about some new way men need to evolve. Then we'll be right back here with you trying to fix something that was never broken. She was crying harder now, finally understanding that her crusade had real consequences. I know who I am, I continued. I'm a man who takes care of his family, who leads when leadership is needed, who protects what he loves. You called that toxic. You spent months trying to convince me that my strength was weakness, that my leadership was oppression. I stood up and walked toward the door. Find yourself a nice evolved General Z guy who will cry with you about his feelings and ask permission to exist. You'll have everything you thought you wanted. Please don't do this, she whispered. I'm not doing anything. I'm just refusing to be with someone who sees my best qualities as problems to be solved. The automated message alert chimed on her phone one last time, feeling grateful for this journey of growth and self-discovery. I turned off the app with a smile. The evolved version of me knows his worth, and his worth isn't determined by someone who spends months trying to diminish it. I walked out the door, leaving her with the divorce papers and the realization that she destroyed her own marriage in pursuit of an ideology that she didn't even believe in. Some lessons are expensive. This one cost her everything. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.